Welcome, folks, to Dicey Banter. This is the TTRPG Talk Show where we talk to all the makers and shakers within the tabletop space while having fun and meaningful conversations while we are at it. And with that, I, Dicey Banter, and this channel stand against genocide and ethnic cleansing, and we support all the oppressed peoples all over the world struggling against imperialism and colonization. Please free DRC, free Sudan, and free Palestine. I know that activism has been a little quiet lately, especially online. Please continue to use your voices, call your reps, boycott, follow the voices of the Palestinian people who are waiting and for us to stand alongside them. Do not be complacent, especially now that the international community has begun their response. While that's a step in a good direction, it's not enough. Keep speaking about it. And with that, thank you all so much for listening to that. I am Valiant Dorian. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a TTRPG AP performer, GM, writer, and streamer. And I'm also your host this evening. And you can find me all around the internet at Valiant Dorian or also SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure hunt to set you on. And tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing my guests who clearly need no introduction in this channel, C and Connie of Transplanar RPG. Please introduce yourself, starting with Connie. Take us away.
It's a me, Connie. Hey, folks. My name is Connie Chang, pronouns they, he, and she. You can find me across the internet at by Connie Chang. That's BYCONNIECHANG. I am the game master and showrunner for Transplanar RPG. We are an all transgender, people of color led, dark fantasy actual play channel telling stories set in an original non colonial, anti Orientalist multiverse. And we are here today to talk about one of our new shows coming out, actually coming out this Saturday, as of when this interview is being released, on the 29th, Godkiller Last Hope. We're going to dig into that a little bit more with Val and C, which I'm so excited about. Speaking of which, go ahead, C.
Hello, everyone. My name is C. I use they, them pronouns. You can find me making very trans, very gay art across the internet at C Plays RPG. As always, I am your dramaturg, producer, and Artemis over on Transplanar RPG. And I also have the absolute pleasure of being Litany, your God Killer, for Godkiller Last Hope. And I'm so excited to get into everything that entails. So without further ado, I will pass it back over to our immaculate host, Val.
We will get into it as your host. That's what Dicey Banter is supposed to get into all the topics. And as Connie and Steve have already discussed, we are going to be talking about all things God Killer Last Hope. I will leave no unspoilered stone unturned. And I will be picking our guests' minds about the production, about the story, and about what we can expect for Transplanar RPG coming next. If you're enjoying this show, please consider donating and leaving us a tip. The funds raised will be used to tip myself and our guests. To show our appreciation, please use !donate in chat to support us. And with that, folks, here is a gorgeous teaser of Godkiller Last Hope. Please enjoy.
This story begins as it is fated to end, with hatred plunged through the chest of a god.
It's about me killing the god that I was made to kill.
You are my downfall.
I'll fix the problem.
Huh?
I'll make you dead.
What? Which limb do you take from them first?
Oh my god.
I am Litany, daughter of Queen Sigu, the first fallen, Lord of Death. Kill or be killed.
That's an overkill. Oh, that's an 11. 13. That's overkill. That's an overkill. You lose yourself to righteous fury. Just get out of the way. Our people must be strong.
Why am I like this? I am made of you.
This is my becoming.
This is my becoming.
What's the matter?
Let me fix that. It's smudged. Here.
Those cracks are sealing up.
They were never meant to be opened.
As she strains away from vengeance and hatred and fury and toward love.
And I would like to wield a power. Not my own. Theirs. And I will use it against them.
Litany, would you like to kill a god?
First of all, Connie and C, Congratulations on the first foray to the in-person studio experience for storytelling for Transplanar RPG. I would first want to ask. I feel like it's a must ask. How did the both of you come to this decision to make the venture into in studio, and how has the experience been?
Yeah, that's a great question. It kind of feels like it's been a long time coming in a lot of
Mm,
ways. It's kind of like both the natural and also the very intentional and informed next step for Transplaners, I think, growth and evolution
mm,
as an actual play channel. We've been doing this for coming up on the end of June, actually, 4 years now as a channel. We've been fully remote up until this point. This is our first foray into in studio work. So we had a lot of goals for I think our first ever venture,
mm,
both as a project that we could cut our teeth on
mm,
for in studio work, kind of figure out growing pains, kind of like gnaw our little teeth on about. And I think as a really exciting opportunity for us to expand our storytelling horizons.
mm,
Um, I think Transplanar is in a really interesting place right now in the actual play space and in TTRPGs as a whole, where I think that I really believe in the work we do, and I think the work we do is really incredible. And we've found such a passionate and dedicated audience for our work. And where I feel compelled to go next as an artist is into the flesh space, into kind of back into my roots as an improviser, as someone in devised theater, as a
mm.
screenwriter, as like an embodied performer. And just based on the experience we had shooting this, I feel really positive about the direction we're headed in.
Yeah, I can mirror basically all of that. And also say, as the producer for Transplanar, and as somebody who gives lots of like technical and acting notes, I found myself like pretty consistently butting up against just the confines of the form
Mm,
as a like digital only space, right? Of being like, oh, I'd really love to do this. I'd really love to push this. I'd really love to have this energy in the action. But there are some things that are just literally not possible, right?
mm,
Or like things that are just like consistent barriers to being able to create and connect the way that I
mm,
think the inclination is moving in, right? Of having these very intense, almost like devised theater adjacent ways
mm.
of performing, very theatrical, very emotive, very dramatic, right? And just having to deal with something like lag from the internet, right? And having and being confined to just this space, right? Is
Yes.
something that I've always struggled with as a performer, and is one of those things that I constantly see and note for myself, but there's nothing I can do about it just based on the
Mm,
form. So being able to step in studio allowed us to play into those natural places where that has been dammed up up until this
mm,
point, right? It just hasn't been able to flow. The water hasn't been able to flow that way. So now
mhm,
we get to actually be like, no, okay, like now we have some open space. Not only do we get to start to break down what it means to be an in studio actual play just by following instinct, right? And following impulse, and following our own artistic desires, but also to be like, oh, okay, like thank God I'm not confined to just this part of my like actor's body, right? In the show. So that I think was another huge push.
Hearing the backgrounds that both of you specifically have, especially as a performer, whether in improv or obviously in theater, that experience that you have, see, I am also extremely curious about the specific studio space and experience that the both of you trying to create, because the typical AP in studio experience is we find a little warehouse, we sit at a table, there will be a DM screen, and we will be sitting in some sort of rectangular fashion. That is not the setup that we see in Godkiller Last Hope. That is not the expected experience from the what we gather from the teaser trailer leading up to this. And I would love to kind of pick the brains of the both of y'all about that specific choice to make the experience of the first in studio foray for the both of y'all to be this intimate round table surrounded by lanterns, and it's you and Connie across the space for one another.
The setup from the beginning was designed to be intimate and dynamic,
Mhm,
insofar as I think the fact that we're playing a duet game actually frees us in a lot of ways to be able to break out of the actual play table. Because when
Yeah.
you have a single game master and like 3 to 6 to maybe 8 or 9 other players, you kind of have to
Yeah.
sit around a table and like have those like static like solo or duo cams or whatever like multi-face cams they can punch into, right? But C and I, there's just the two of us. So that freed us up pretty immensely to be able to play with the physical space around us and for us to be like literally right there in front of each other, like getting close and like bouncing off of that energy of each other. So we didn't want it to look like a typical TTRPG table because it wasn't a typical TTRPG table. It was
Yeah.
a duet framework, and we wanted every part of the production and the set to reflect that.
Yeah.
Yeah, even just thinking about the ways that we've played Godkiller the most that I've played Godkiller has been like horizontal in bed, just looking at Connie, right? With like this much space between our faces. So finding that again, what Connie was saying, like this natural intimacy of the game form and of the narrative of the game was important. And a lot of words that we threw around for the set design, so to speak, was like black box theater, right? Where we don't necessarily want or need to have a fancy backdrop or lots of props. Like everything there is very intentional and very intimate, right? Even the lanterns as forming almost a proscenium arch. Rowan used that in the Rascal interview, and I thought that was like so spot on. And then everything that's on the table is intentionally there and is used at different points throughout the show, which is really nice and very special. And I think that all speaks toward the desire that I was talking about to break out of the box, right?
Yeah.
There was like no way I would be damned if I started and ended this show sitting down in a chair where you just saw this part of me and I only acted
Yeah.
here, right? The idea of stepping into this studio was to do that. So there was no way really for my impulse and my desires as an artist that I was just going to let myself stay there. So we do lots of walking around the table. I lean over, Connie leans over, we cross each other, we like hold, we push pull, come like up and down stage even like and getting to have that freedom I think was one of my favorite parts, honestly. Was also really hard to break out of the habit of remote actual play.
No, for sure. And I'm sure that shift has been it is felt, especially after doing Transplanar and a lot of the actual play work that this channel has done remotely and virtually for so long. I'm deeply excited though for the in-studio experience. The trailer leaves us wanting more and desiring more to know what this foray is looking like. In fact, many in the actual play space are already curious and wondering about what threshold this is going to cross in terms of the actual play experience. So congratulations on that. But before we wrap up the in-studio experience, I want to know about the both of y'all, and now that you've had a taste of the in-studio experience, what does that mean for Transplanar's future?
Well, Val, it's funny you ask, because a lot of Godkiller Last Hope, the intention there was for Connie and I to do, it was an artistic endeavor, it was an endeavor of love, it was a natural desire, it was also a test run. It was also a test run to see like how possible is this with a shoestring budget in our backyard. And it's also a proving ground to be like, look what we can do with a shoestring budget in our backyard. Imagine if you gave us the funds to be able to bring the whole cast out to have a real studio that didn't have a train running every 40 minutes that we could hear through the wall, which is
Yeah.
a real thing that was happening on Friday.
No, that was a real thing. We had to like stop and retake so many lines because there was
Oh,
a freaking
no.
train blaring its horn in distance.
Yeah, like quite literally.
Yeah.
So not only a proving ground, but also a place of experimentation where we can be like, all of the lessons that we have taken from Last Hope will be utilized for future in-studio work for Transplanar, for the Chaos Protocol, and future projects.
It's very much a proof of concept in a lot of ways. I do think of Last Hope as a finished work in and of itself and on its own terms, but it is, like he said, also proof of concept. It's kind of a demonstration of what we could do with so little. I think like very few resources and kind of like a invitation to people out there who might want to further support our work and the door is open. If you want to throw money at us, throw money at us, so we can keep doing this and doing it even better, even bigger, even better, even brighter, because I know we can and we will.
I am deeply excited about that, and I'm deeply excited for Transplanar's future. And with that, I think this is the time for us to talk about Godkiller Last Hope. I think it's time. I think it's time for us to talk about this story that has been teased at us for quite some time, and another Godkiller series after First Blood. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Godkiller Last Hope. So we know that this new series is set in the Sister Realms, and it is a world. For those of y'all who have not watched the Chaos Protocol, it is a world that we have visited in the Chaos Protocol, specifically in Arc 2. And this story will be taking place after the events of Arc 2, it seems like. And another Godkiller story emerges in the world. And as I said, we've already had a series that utilizes the system Godkiller with First Blood. What new angles of Godkiller gameplay can we look forward to here in this specific game? Or are we following a very similar route with First Blood?
I'm really excited to answer, but I'll let you go first, Connie, if you'd like to.
Oh no, the floor is yours. I'm gesturing for you to just let this one rip.
Well, I'm very excited about it as the God Killer because I got to play with a lot of the new shiny toys. So Connie has released the ash can of God Killer, but it is only the ash can. So I had the absolute pleasure of getting to run the ash can version with Connie in First Blood. And First Blood was very much a similar proof of concept, more so for, I think, God Killer the game. Right? Like kind of the first AP to be like, hey, look at what you could do in a God Killer system. Here's the type of story that you could tell. And I think it followed a very classic God Killer narrative of a mortal stepping into their divinity, into their ability to kill a god.
Yes.
And very much being like, here's how you play, here are the rules, here's the presentation. Where in God Killer Last Hope, I think that we give ourselves a lot of permission to play with narratives that might not be as overtly apparent. And I can get into that. I'm gonna like put a pin in that and then go to also. I have so much to say. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and this is the floor and the forum for you to do so.
But something that is really fun that we got to do in Last Hope is that I got to play with a bunch of shiny new bells and whistles, some like slightly modified mechanics, and a new origin that Connie made just for me, but that will be in the full release of the game that will be coming out in 2025 with Evil Hat. So we got to I got to play the new game again. But also I had a lot of fun being able to tell what I have been affectionately referring to as a God Killer narrative told in reverse, where I very intentionally took and made a character who is already deeply entrenched in divinity and has a preconceived idea of what it means to be a God Killer. God Killer, unlike Faroon in First Blood, is a very familiar term to Litany. They know what it means to be the God Killer. They have claimed that name way before we meet them for the first time in the series itself. And rather than this kind of like prototypical story of God Killer who is a mortal that steps into divinity, into being the God Killer, this is a person who is deeply entrenched in the divine, who has to step into their mortality for the first time, into their mortal heart, which is kind of like a lot of the stuff that we've been teasing in our promos and press releases and so on. And I think that has been one of the very fun differences between First Blood and Last Hope that I'm really excited for people to be able to see and get into.
Both in addition to a little bit of new rules that we're using here that the new origin that wasn't apparent in the ash can for First Blood, and I think the new kind of like character arc that Litany is going on that is very much like an inversion of the typical quote unquote typical God Killer narrative. The world of Last Hope is extremely different from First Blood, and I think the way that the gods act are also really different, because in a typical God Killer story, and this is in the ash can, though I'm modifying this kind of for the full game, there's this event known as the Devouring, where the gods are like actively at war with each other and like actively eating each other. And in some cradles, which is the name of the setting for a God Killer game as a whole. There are maybe rules or laws in place to prevent the devouring from happening, right? And there's like specific taboos around eating another god or
Mm,
killing another god. And that is very much apparent in the world of Last Hope. And it's also very interesting because a typical Godkiller game, the gods walk among mortals. Like you can go up to like a mountain peak and like confront the god of the mountain, right? You can go
mm,
down to the depths of the ocean and confront the god of the ocean, right? Like you probably have like a local god who's in charge of your municipality or something, right? Who you might
yeah.
have like petty squabbles with. But in the world of Last Hope, the gods are very sectioned off. They live in their own place. And this is because of
Mm,
a lore-based reason, a really important lore-based reason, actually. They're like separate from the world of the mortals, and there's a
mm,
division there. And that was something I also leaned into for this particular narrative. And it was an interesting creative challenge as well, because I'm thinking something I asked myself pretty early on in the plot building process was, well, how can we have a god killer game when there are like very few gods for Litany to
yeah.
confront? Like, I'm like, I don't want to end this story with them having only like not killed any gods. Like, how
Yeah.
can we call this a god killer game otherwise, right? So there was a lot of like fun, I think, immense creativity that we were able to find because of those limitations. And it was really, we were able to really fruitfully probe at those borders.
Mm. That is so deeply curious, and I'm very, very excited to see the story unfold. But we've already mentioned their name a few times now. Let's talk about Litany. Let's talk about Litany, who, based on artwork and vibe of the trailer, does feel very C-core. Litany does feel very
Yeah,
C-core.
I made a
But
Blorbo.
you made a Blorbo, and I want to know what inspired, specifically the creation of this specific Blorbo in Last Hope.
Oh, Val, what a delight, what a delight. So, you know that at the heart of me, I
Mm,
am a Blood Hunter main, which is
yes, you are.
perhaps more accurate to say that the Blood Hunter class was made for me. It's
I
not
think
that the
so.
Blood Hunter class changed me. It's that I just said, "Oh yeah, that's for me." All
Matt
to
Mercer was
say,
thinking about you when
yeah.
when Blood Hunters were
Thank
created.
you for that. But to say that I love playing into themes of death, the underworld, violence, right? So that was very present for me in knowing Litany's story and desiring and creating Litany. And there's this other area of interest that has come out in Chaos as well, of a failed chosen one. I love that archetype. I find it very delicious. So one of the very first things, and this is not so much a spoiler, this is pretty apparent for Litany,
Mm,
which is to say that like Litany fails desperately at the one thing that they were created to do, and that kicks off the entire story. It happens in the very first 5 minutes, right?
yeah.
Is this massive failure for Litany. And that was kind of the core conceit of this character for me.
Mm,
When thinking about who they are, almost like positing them very much as as an anti-hero or even an
mhm,
anti-villain, right? And what it means to take a god killer who has created this narrative of who they're supposed to be and send them immediately down a spiraling path of redemption and identity, right?
mm,
And I think a lot of God Killer Last Hope is about cycles. And
mm,
for me, thinking about Litany, a lot of their themes kind of come from and resonate with not necessarily this like I think there might be a surface level reading of Litany as like
mhm.
kind of Adora style child soldier. Oh, like am I the villain? Like am I
Okay.
the villain? Right? But I think that that is actually not necessarily accurate, right? Because
Mm,
Litany's story is very intentionally not about a violent person finding peace. It's about a violent person finding purpose within their violence. And this comes from my and like this conception of them comes from this experience that I have with cycles of addiction,
mm,
poverty, trauma, and interpersonal violence. And
okay.
I think like it digs deeper into this idea of what it means to be and finding your
Yeah.
purpose, right? Carrying the baggage of your family, like holding a legacy and thinking that you might be a product of your environment as some unescapable destiny.
Yeah, I think a lot of Last Hope is about probing beyond superficial or surface level interpretation of the themes that we're
Mm,
exploring
okay.
because we grapple with violence, but we don't say violence is bad,
Yeah.
right? Or even that violence is dangerous. Like that's not where violence should be handled responsibly. Like that's not even necessarily what we're saying.
Mhm.
We're I think what we both really tried to do with Last Hope was to drill really deep down and get really personal with the story and lend nuance and complication to the characters who matter in the
Yes.
story. Litany is the character who matters in the story, right? But there are other core
Untrue.
NPCs. She's pushing back on me with that. Well, I as
I
a GM,
am. I
I'm always
am
gonna be
pushing
your
back
big
on that.
fan. I'm always gonna be your biggest fan, and I'm always gonna think of you as like the center of the universe, you know, in everything I do and all the stories that we tell. But I hear what you're saying, C, in terms of like there are other core centers of the universe for Last Hope, and I don't want to, you know, even saying their names would be a spoiler, I think, but there are very crucial NPCs whose journeys are just as important as litanies. In I think how their arcs affect what happens in the story, as well as how they affect litany. And I think, yeah, just like the characters who matter are complicated, and it was
Yeah.
important for us to highlight that complication.
That is deeply interesting about, especially as creators, to talk about interpretation in a very intentional sense. And what I mean by that is I suppose the awareness of this theme or this character or this arc can be interpreted as such and such. We're trying to drill into a far more deeper personal aspect of the interpretation of what this theme could be. I want to kind of like dive deeper into that almost for both of y'all in that awareness and being and trying to give different dimensions to the story that you're about to tell. Guide me through that process of that and how how do you go about it, especially considering that interpretations happen as soon as it reaches the eyes and ears of the audience? How do we maneuver past that or with that?
I think there's something about signaling, right?
Mm,
Just in these interviews being like there's a deeper resonance here because
mm,
I think that every audience is going to bring themselves to the work and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Thinking
yeah,
of Litany as this like child soldier narrative is not necessarily incorrect, but I think
mm,
it might draw upon certain like preconceived biases or ways of seeing the world that are not necessarily in line with the values of the world that we've created and that Connie has created with
I
Transplanar
see.
broadly, which is very like rooted and focused in non-colonial anti-Orientalist world building.
Understood.
So there are some things within that where I think that surface level reading is not necessarily incorrect, right? And there I think is a great depth that you can receive from viewing the work this way in whatever way you view it. But I
Mhm.
think there is some level of understanding that especially and I'm going to start this train of thought, especially as white people viewing and participating in work, that there is a desire and a necessity to be able to let go of your own preconceived notions when viewing work made outside of your own experience, right? And
Mm,
being able to listen not just to the words that are resonating with you, but the words that were put on the page and the intentional way that they were put on the page. And that often means being able to like to understand and to do research and to like deepen your understanding of what something what's happening, I suppose.
mm,
Meaning is generated from the act of witnessing because, like
yes.
C said, every audience member, every viewer or listener brings their own perspective to a piece of art.
Yes.
And you know, that's kind of what death of the author means. Like at a certain point, like the author's intention, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, you make your own meaning by your own relationship to the work and your own interaction with the work, right? Because some could argue that the author's intentions don't matter, then I would argue that I don't care how you interpret my work because I know what it's about. Right. So, like, no matter what lens you bring to the work, like, that's fine. Like, you could, you know, bring any sort of lens to any work, right? We could have a postmodern third wave feminist reading of Jaws, right? And I'm sure there's a brilliant essay written about that, right? But like, was that necessarily what the director was thinking of when he directed and made Jaws? You know, like who knows? So the work that we're making, it's important to me that during our art creating process, we cut out the editor, like the editing brain. That is crucial, I think, for us to be able to freely make art. That doesn't mean we are making art irresponsibly. In fact, I think it kind of means the opposite. It means that I'm making art that is true to me and that is responsible to my viewpoint and my perspective and my voice, right? And we can't have too many cooks in the kitchen, especially cooks who aren't even physically there, right? So I'm not even worried at, like when I'm in a scene about like what other people might think. Like that's the role for after the scene ends when we take notes from Zoe, our dramaturg, right? Then Zoe can be like, oh, this might read that way, let's try this again, or like something else, right? And that's specifically why we work with a dramaturg on set. As for, I think, a very complicated way of world building, I want to touch on something you said about like, I think challenging and inviting specifically white audiences to decenter themselves with this work, because every aspect of Last Hope, it's even apparent in the trailer that we ran, is rooted in a deeply personal, deeply Connie understanding of Chinese diaspora and of Chineseness and queer and trans Chineseness. It's in the set dressing, right? Like the little lanterns. It's in the
Yeah.
go board that we use in place of a battle map, right? It's in the little altar we have set up in the center of the table. It's in my costuming, right? It's in the hua dian I'm wearing. It's in the hanfu that I style for myself, right? And it's in like I even use like speak in snippets of Mandarin, right? Like while the show's happening. And the world building itself, the sister realms, the cradle is called Yaolan, which literally means cradle in Mandarin, right? Like
Yeah.
the mythological touchstones, the names of the characters, all of these are like they're influenced by ciencia, not European medieval fantasy, right? They're rooted in a deeply culturally Chinese understanding of what fantasy and magic are, you know. Tiansheng, who is the core NPC for this series, is a cultivator. She's not a mage, she's not a warrior or a paladin. She's a cultivator, which is a
Yes.
specifically like Chinese, like
Yeah.
fantasy archetype, right?
Yes.
That doesn't exist in the West. So all of these things might be, I think, a little dizzying, or maybe might feel a little distant perhaps for like white audiences to be able to immediately resonate with or relate to, right? There's that dreaded word relatability.
Yeah.
I think the drive for relatability when unexamined is a tool of
Assimilation.
assimilation.
Yes.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Sure.
because I'm thinking of fucking Pixar.
The
I think it was
Pixar.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
the exec in charge of whatever the fuck his name is. You can tell that I really care about execs. But one of the execs in charge of Pixar recently like released a statement about how like, oh, we're moving away from movies where directors are seeking some sort of personal catharsis and moving toward movies that are like universally appealing or like universally relatable, right? So like moving away from things like Turning Red or Encanto or like, movies that are culturally not European or like not white, and toward things like Toy Story, right? Or like Inside Out, which let's look what the similarities and the differences are and what they're moving away from and moving toward. And movies like stories like Toy Story and Inside Out, they are actually extremely culturally specific. They
Yes.
speak about like a white middle class upbringing, and they're also really personal. Toy Story is deeply personal to the director. Inside Out,
Yeah.
I would assume, is really personal to the director as well, and is about like a white teenage girl's struggle with her emotions and adolescence, right? And
Yeah.
I think that the more personal we get, actually, the more universal we get with our themes, because it's only in like deeply personal experiences that we find universal truths, right? Whatever you define as a truth, because I think truth is inherently subjective, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have to get into ontology at this point.
Oh, we'll get into
So
it probably later. But yes, we will definitely
that's
get
another
into
point,
it.
right? Yeah. So I see Last Hope actually as an invitation to people who aren't Chinese, who aren't trans, who aren't queer, who like don't see anything to relate to on the surface level, but like give it a shot. Sit down, really watch it, right? And like watch it in a way that doesn't bring any assumptions about what it should be, what it might be, what an actual play should be, how playing a game should look, right?
Yeah.
Just like let go of that. Just sit and just enjoy. Just like watch the work and let the work speak to you on its terms, right? And I think that when we let go, when we allow ourselves to release the veils over our eyes, we open ourselves to deeply meaningful experiences with the art that we see.
Yeah.
And I think the striving for relatability is rooted in assimilationism, which I'm always trying to resist. And it's also rooted in a unquestioned centering of whiteness at
Yes.
the core of everything. At the
Yeah.
core of everything. Whiteness, a very white supremacist way of understanding gender, of understanding what
Mm,
fantasy is, of understanding how to play a game, right? I
yeah.
think even the idea that there is a correct way to do things, I think is white supremacist. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sitting here
And
thinking.
I think that's deeply fair, and especially in a project such as this, where it seems like, and it's very obvious to, I feel like, the audience and to whoever is looking at the trailer, that the both of you, alongside Zoe, your dramaturg, alongside the crew on set, are trying something new here and are showcasing to the TTRPG world at large that here's what's possible, here's what storytelling can look like, and not just on a technical level, but also on the level of stories and storytelling, meaning, interpretation, breaking dimensions, and such and such. And on that topic, I would love to tap into additional storytelling elements, which is we are introduced to another major figure in Godkiller Last Hope, who we are very familiar with for audiences of the Chaos Protocol, Sigu, who is a major thematic cornerstone for Litany's journey, it seems like. What can we expect as the audience member as we go into Godkiller Last Hope? What can we expect to see of their character and their character arcs and the dynamics between Litany and Sigu? I personally am very excited to see the both of you on opposite ends in these complicated scenes. I feel like we've gotten a taste of that within the trailer, but please tell me what we can expect of their arcs and dynamic with one another.
Well, Tsigu is a bad mom. And I don't even think that's a spoiler necessarily to say. It's like really obvious. She is a complicated woman.
Mm,
Uh they are a very complicated woman. Someone who is shackled in more ways than one,
mm,
both a prisoner of and the shackle itself of hatred and pain. This character, because I'm trying really hard not to go into spoilers here,
okay, yeah.
is very much like a love letter from me to all of the grief and the pain that my mother and her mother and her mother and all of the women in my family and the women in my ancestry have had to endure and have
Mm,
had to survive and overcome, not because they wanted to, but because they had to, because
yeah,
it's deeply unfair.
yeah.
So I think when we were talking about cycles, there's definitely cycles of trauma, cycles of grief, cycles of rage. And
Mm,
at the core of these cycles, kind of the spokes of this wheel all braid back to Tsigu.
mm,
And I think to just call her one thing, I think would be whether that's like um she's just the villain, she's just a bad guy, right? Or she's just this or that, would do a great disservice to the story I'm trying to tell
mm.
and the kind of complication I'm trying to lend to you, because you don't have to like all of the NPCs I make, right? And in fact, I think
Yeah.
I actually think I'm something of a I think I'm actually quite good at making characters that people really hate, as I've seen in a lot of the fandom spaces. Like I'm quite good at embodying like smarmy assholes like Adam, and it's like a stranger, or like a deeply complicated and very polarizing figure like Fate in the
Mm,
Chaos Protocol. Even Sing in some regards, I think she's, as the chosen one, I think there's a lot of baggage she carries and a lot of flaws that she has that I play very apparently.
mhm,
Um, but it's important to me that even my antagonists, perhaps especially my antagonists, are like deeply complex because they are in so many ways mirrors of the protagonists, foils to the PCs, and what they could become, what they might already be in some ways, and how we treat them, I think, also really speaks toward how we might treat the characters we are rooting for if only things went slightly different for them in their lives. So I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
I see Tsigu with a lot of compassion, which doesn't necessarily justify or excuse what she's done and how she treats other people. I think the instinct to just throw her aside
It's
and
carceral.
is carceral. Yeah, I was gonna say, because she is in so many ways a prisoner of hatred and pain. So to just throw her away, I think, would be a really sad way to treat the narrative.
Yeah, this is where my understanding of addiction comes in. Because I think a lot of people hate addicts way more than they think they do. I think
Absolutely.
that, like,
For
across
sure.
the board, so like people hate and treat addicts with such disregard, disrespect,
Contempt,
and
even.
contempt, like stripping them of their humanity. And I speak for the ways that I have understood myself and understood like my own situation, right?
Absolutely.
Like my own heart.
Mhm.
And Tsigu for me, because everything that you have been talking about, Connie, in the ways that you bring Tsigu in, I think the beautiful part of this narrative is that just because I play Litany doesn't mean that these other characters don't have parts of me in them, right? The way
Mm.
that we've braided together both the world, and we can like get into this later too, are resonant for you, Connie, and are also resonant for me, just
Yeah.
in the same way that Litany is like you said the center of your universe. Well, the universe lives inside Litany, right? That you've made, and Tsigu for me carries that, right, that understanding of what it means to be an addict and what it means to be right when you think about yourself, right, and you wonder, like, was I doomed just from the start because of who I am, because of how I grew up, because of things outside of my control, because of things that happened to me, because of my own feelings, because of my responses, right? Like,
Yeah.
if only I was a better person, right? If only I was born better. And I think that gets into so many deep things that we as a society, and when we talk about liberational storytelling, need
Yes.
to start unpacking, right? Because that's all white Catholic guilt, right? That's all colonialism. That's all white supremacy. That's all that fucking baggage, right? To say those things, right? Um, I'm not an addict because I was born broken. I'm just an addict, right? And that's kind of we bring that into the second stranger, right? Of like like you are a monster. It doesn't mean I love you more or less. You just are, right?
Yeah.
And that those cycles form us, yes, right? And there's always the ability to choose and to try and to make new cycles, right? And I think holding that with a lot of love and with a lot of empathy frees me far more than any immediate blaming of bad person ever could. To look at Tsigu and call her a bad person is easy. I think it's also carceral. I think it is what some people might need to do, right, for their own journeys of healing. But for me, as a player, as the player in this world, what I needed to do was see Tsigu for who she is, right? Like what you said, Connie, a prisoner, as an addict, as somebody who is in the very same cycle of grief, trauma, vengeance, violence that Litany is at the start of the campaign. I'm getting so emotional. It's very emotional and very
No, this is. I mean, it's deeply
Yeah.
personal for both of us in different ways.
Yeah.
And I really, I've been thinking about this a lot quite recently, and I've spoken about it with you a few times. See, about the idea of like breaking cycles
Yes.
Mhm.
doesn't really sit with me
Mm.
as a mode of understanding my own liberation and my own journey of healing. I know that the idea of like breaking a cycle of trauma or breaking like generational what have you like can be very liberating for some people. It isn't really for me because it feels almost like not necessarily disrespectful of, but maybe a little even like
Like an
in
undoing.
denial of the weight of how heavy a fucking cycle is. Like a
Mm.
cycles of generational trauma can't just be broken like that. It
Yeah.
goes deep. When we talk about generational trauma, like
Mm.
it's literally in your genes. You know, the trauma that your great grandmother is literally passed down through the blood to you
Yeah.
and affects you on a biological, biomechanical level. So like you can't just break literally physically, you can't just break it like that, right?
Yeah.
And you also can't just like break I don't it doesn't free me because I don't know if that's how it works for me. And I
Mm.
also, even if it were, I'm more interested in seeing the cycle, acknowledging it,
Mhm.
acknowledging all of the pain and the shit, you know, that my family, my mother, my grandmother, my ancestors have gone through, and then starting a new cycle, starting new cycles on my own
Mhm.
terms. So yes, I am affected by the wheels that came before me, right? This wheel, the wheel will spin how the wheel will spin and it will make me, right? But I can put new wheels into motion. And I think for me that's a lot more fruitful than trying to destroy something that is so huge and
Mhm.
impossible to surmount, right? I'm thinking specifically about like cycles of like you know, racism and like
Yeah.
generational systemic historical embedded racism.
Mm.
That's not anything that anyone can just undo on an individual level. That also removes you from conversation with your community because
Absolutely.
if an individual cannot break a cycle, it
Mm.
takes an entire community to create cycles of trauma and to
Mhm.
uphold them and to shield people who hurt other people and to like come to you know right. It will take a
Yeah.
community to undo that.
It's
Like I
systemic.
truly do
It's a
believe that.
system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't like
Mhm.
therapy your way out of systemic racism, right? Like you can't, and
Boy,
that's
you
why I
can't.
don't like. Yeah, like that's why I don't like the idea of just like easily breaking a cycle. I think I would much prefer to put my energy into cultivating love in other places.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this idea that like that cycle also made me, right?
Mm.
And I like who I am, right? Like, yes,
Yeah.
I am an addict, right? But that also has informed so many different things about me, and I think is a way that I can allow myself to see the world differently, that
Yeah.
like deepens my empathy, that deepens my ability to connect with others, that like gives me a context and an understanding, right? That shapes every part of me, just like my transness does, just like
Mm.
my race does, right? Just like my family history does. And those perspectives I think are important to hold, right? But that
Mm.
doesn't mean that I'm going to act on them, right?
Mm.
Always.
I think that's beautifully said. And as we wrap up this section of the interview and head to a break, I got one final thing to ask y'all. Give me 3 words for what audiences can expect from Godkiller Last Hope's plot and storytelling before we head to a break.
Mercy, pain, kill.
Wow, that's very deeply core words that just came out of your mouth. I do not know what else I expected.
Should I go now? Should I go now?
Yes, of course, Connie.
Blood, bone, blade.
Whoo! Let's go. Alrighty. And with that, folks, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Please get up, stretch, pet your pets. Tell them Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. And we will be back with more Godkiller Last Hope discussions as we lead into the release later this week. And this is a great opportunity for you all to also enjoy the teaser trailer once more during the break. And with that, I will see you all in 10 minutes. Take care in a bit. Bye.
没有人可以取代，不知不觉地放开你，我们都没有那勇气 ，baby。I'm sorry, I'm so lonely，我们都没有错与对，找不到任何一个原因，没有理由的离开 ，baby。I'm sorry, I'm so lonely。
Yeah, yeah，看见信息不是不想回你，只是我们的对话少了一些甜蜜。看似很正常的语句，但透的距离，我不知道该怎么对你，也许是成长的关系。我没事，每刻都告诉自己，我还是很爱你的，只是 lonely。不知道微信什么时候开始没有表情，你的上班时间多了，没有那么多的高兴。
没有人可以去等待。 知不觉地放开你，我们都没有那勇气，baby。I'm sorry, I'm so lonely。
我们都没有错与对。
Tell me now, how do I feel? I see a ship in the harbor. I can't enter a bay.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you took that time to get up, stretch, pet your pets, and tell them Mr. Van Dorian loves them very, very much. And as we come back to this incredible interview with the the two halves of Godkiller Last Hope, I would like to invite folks, if you are enjoying the show, please use exclamation point donate to leave us a tip. The tip will go towards myself as well as our remarkable guests, and it would be a token of appreciation that we would be deeply grateful for. And with that, with all that being said, let us hop right back in to the interview. And as we chat more about Godkiller Last Hope, we in the Chaos Protocol, it is no secret that the Sister Realms and the world building that was made for Arc 2 of the Chaos Protocol is a deeply intimate and Chinese diasporic experience for you, Connie, especially. And I wanted to hone in even more into that, and I wanted to ask about how does Last Hope speak to your specific diasporic experience, maybe in adjacent to or alongside Arc 2 Chaos Protocol, or even further from that.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm
Sorry, I
so
saw him.
sorry.
It's so
I'm
important.
so sorry.
It's so important to see him. No, this is so important.
Abba says
There
free
he is.
Palestine. Oh my god.
I'm moving. I'm moving you. I'm moving you. There we go. There he is. There he is. This is important. This is
That's
important.
my son.
Oh my god.
That's
Okay.
my son.
That's our son. Anyway, thank you for standing by.
No
But
worries.
yes.
It's
So
important.
the world of Godkiller Last Hope very much God. Now my camera is like last header. There we go. Okay. So the world of Godkiller Last Hope is very much based on, like I've mentioned in the first half of this discussion, my own cultural understandings of fantasy
Yes.
from a very Chinese cultural lens. And obviously, there's no single Chinese cultural lens. There's over like, a billion Chinese people, and every single one of us, no matter if we are diasporic, if we're Chinese national, overseas
Mm.
Chinese, however we identify, every single one of us has a unique understanding of
Yes.
Chineseness, what it means to us, how we identify with it, what our relationship with it is, and the world of the sister realms is my relationship with my Chineseness. I think come to fruition.
Mm.
This is a deeply magical world full of cultivators and gods and demons and ghosts,
Mhm.
where there's been a great trauma in this world that has shaped this world into what it is, and there are people, gods, mortals, demons, ghosts, and monsters alike,
Yeah.
who work together and against each other to reshape the world
Mm.
that better fits their ideals. It's a very active world. It is a world full of clashing viewpoints, and a core theme of the Sister Realms in Last Hope is this idea of tradition and change, and
Yeah.
places where these two themes butt heads and generate friction, and places where they overlap.
Mm.
And there we can see similarities and connection drawn between
Mm.
these two different camps. And for me, the Godkiller itself is
Mm.
also a very diasporic figure, because the
Okay.
Godkiller is someone who can move between worlds, literally. Not just worlds, but also between mortality and divinity. right? Because
Yes.
as a god killer, you are a being, an entity imbued with divine power, but you have a mortal heart. And the core of the game system itself is about that struggle. It's
Mm,
about that unique struggle that only you can truly understand. But you get to
mm,
decide what that means. You get to decide what it means to be the god killer at your
mm,
own table, right? The game will not provide any answers for you. That's something
mhm.
that you need to play to find out. And we
Yeah.
play to find that out in Last Hope. And that's very much informed by my own perspective as an Asian American, specifically Chinese American. I am always very inspired by, and I very much resonate with what Eugene Lee Yang has said of
Yes.
the Try Guys, actually formerly of the Try Guys now, that they are they are not just defined by the label of Asian American,
Mm,
they get to define what being Asian American means through their work. And that resonates with me really deeply. I'm not just defined by what it means to be Chinese American, because of course I am, right? My Chinese
Yeah.
Americanness affects my life. It affects my perspective as a storyteller. But
Mhm,
through my work, through my art, and through my own unique perspective, I get to define what it means to be Chinese American. And
mm,
this is kind of one of those things that I'm doing, right? Last Hope is a way of me defining what it means to make art as a Chinese American person, what it means to be Chinese American as well. Like this is me laying that down on the table and doing it. And I think that I very much am striving to move beyond, I think, this idea of stuckness, of being like
mm.
stuck between worlds, right? Because I
Okay.
think that's something that a lot of diasporic folk, I'm speaking specifically from my experience as a Chinese American person, but I see it across the Asian diaspora as
Yeah.
well. And I've heard some resonance across like the Black diaspora and the African diaspora with this as well. This idea of like, okay, we're stuck between worlds, we're stuck between worlds, we're stuck between worlds, right?
Yeah.
And kind of only staying there, which I think, that's very real. And I
Mm.
don't mean to diminish that experience or struggle at all. But I do think sometimes that diasporic Chinese art can remain stuck there, ironically,
Yes.
within their own interrogation of stuckness. And I try to like strive beyond
Mm.
that, beyond feelings of I'm rejected both by my American side and my Chinese
Yeah.
side, right?
Yeah.
Um, moving beyond that, right?
And
And
redefining
toward redefining
what
it
that
on
means.
my own terms and toward creating the culture myself actively. Like I get to define what that means, and I'm
Yeah.
not just a victim of fate. I'm an embodied, empowered agent, a liberated agent, and that kind of actually brings me to C,
Yes.
uh, as my player here, uh, inviting C on into the world of the Sister Realms, into the role of God Killer, which, as
Yes.
we've discovered, is informed by my experience as a Chinese
Yeah.
person. Um, this is very much an invitation of trust, an invitation of love, an invitation of cultural exchange
Yeah.
and bridge building. Um, the term overseas Chinese and Mandarin, huatiao, that's what that means.
Mm.
It's basically like a Chinese person who doesn't live in China for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And this can apply to diaspora Chinese people as well. The literal translation of it, huatiao, is like Chinese bridge,
Yeah.
or bridge of Chineseness. Xiao is like bridge. Hua
Yeah.
is like a term that it's like a classical term to refer to like the Chinese ethnicity or
Chinese.
nationality.
Mm.
And that's how I kind of understand my diaspora at this point of my artistic journey, is that
Mm.
I see myself as a bridge,
Yeah.
right? But I get to decide where that bridge begins,
Mm.
where it crosses over, and where it lands. And
Mm.
like, that bridge, I've very much extended that over to C. And it's not just unidirectional. When I say cultural exchange, I genuinely mean like an exchange. It's not just me being like, see, you are gonna play a Chinese person now, and you have
Ye-
to learn to speak Mandarin, and
Yeah.
you have to like come here and like immerse yourself in this culture. Not necessarily, right? Like it's like this is the world that I've built, that I've put so much of myself into. I want you to come in here, not as a tourist,
Mhm.
not as a voyeur, not as like an expat, right? Or like anything like that, but as someone who's bringing your own world and your
Mhm.
own universe embodied through litany. Litany is an integral part of the world,
Mm.
is a part of the world. You're not like a foreigner here, like you are of this realm, and your upbringing, in rural New York, right? As like a farm boy, your understandings of addiction and whatnot, you're bringing all of these things in as well. You're braiding all of your own personal cultural understandings in as well. And that is kind of what it meant to build the Sister Realms from my own
Mm.
like diasporic Chinese experience.
Absolutely, and I think this is a incredible opportunity for me to bring C here into the fold here, kind of similarly to how you brought C into the fold with Godkiller Last Hope. Let's talk about that. C, as a white person entering into Godkiller Last Hope, and the world of the Sister Realms that is so incredibly cultural and specific to Chinese experience and Chinese fantasy and Connie's interpretation of that fantasy. What was the process there of this cultural exchange and entering the space as a white person? Yes,
All right,
yes,
let's
do
get
it.
into it.
Let's get
Let's
into
get
it.
because I have many, 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 many thoughts about this. So
Yes,
something that we're constantly saying about Godkiller as a whole
yeah.
is that Godkiller is a love letter. And in
Mm,
the dedication of Godkiller, the game, Connie writes that it is dedicated to me. I, as the Godkiller, write with everything that I do, with every way that I act, with everything that I bring as a love letter to Connie, right? The act of playing God Killer is my love letter back to Connie. It is this
mhm,
constant exchange of love letters being written back and forth. And I think that in doing so, right, there is a necessity that part of my love letter recognizes who I'm writing to, right?
yes.
And that's exactly what we were talking about, this the specificity, right? Of like, I could not write a love letter to Connie without acknowledging, understanding, loving, and being intentional and reflexive about the fact that Connie is Chinese, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is just a central core identity and part of who they are, right? And there is no world in which I would step into a place of trust, of love, of co creation and say, make this world less Chinese for me because I'm white. I
Yeah.
think that doing so would be a massive violation of the interpersonal relationship that Connie and I have, and would
Hmm.
also be an act of violence. I think that that would be one of the most disrespectful things that I could ever do to not just my partner in this game, but my partner in life.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's really, really important and very central to me. And just
Mm,
like Connie said, when I step into this world, that I think is created and informed very much by everything that you were talking about, Connie, about Cynthia, about like Chinese folkloric touchstones. There is also me here, right?
yes.
Like the fact that, and this is not so much a spoiler, but the earthen realm that is frequented in Godkiller Last Hope is a mountainous region. And that comes from my personal experience of being like, I want this to be set in a mountain,
Yeah.
right? In the mountains, because that is something that resonates with me very deeply. Right. And even thinking about when we were living in Minnesota, there were many, many reasons why we decided to move back to the East Coast, but I missed mountains,
Yeah.
right? That's where my family lineage comes from, is alpine, rural alpine community, right?
Mm,
And being able to find a bridge back and forth, right? What Connie
mm,
said, that this is a two-way exchange. It will always
yeah.
be a two-way exchange of me being able to bring parts of myself to be recognized and to be loved in the same way that Connie is bringing parts of himself to be loved and to be recognized. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I try to play the parts that Connie has created, right?
Mm,
I don't try to play the Chinese elements of the world. I do not try to play the Chinese NPCs. Litany is an interesting character, right?
mm,
And I think that they are not Chinese in a
yeah.
lot of ways. In a lot of ways, they are living in a cultural context that I think has no easy one-to-one like metaphor for the world that
Yeah.
we currently live in, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the exploration of fantasy here, right? And the context of Litany as a character.
In our previous discussions, talking about the cultural exchange and the inclusion and the love letters, which is a very cute way of saying it, that you write to each other consistently in your active storytelling. I want to kind of like delve into we're going to kind of zoom out from the personal into kind of like the wider space conversation of there's always kind of almost like a prescriptive approach when we talk about who can play what within TTRPG and actual plays, right? which obviously has its merits, and especially in shows that have paid performers, etc. Right? There's a huge discussion that can be had here. I would love to hear your thoughts as an in-studio production, crafting the story together and continuing to balance these two spaces of decentering whiteness and centering the personal experience for the both of y'all, and perhaps maybe the humanity that is ultimately the more the universal aspect that is the cornerstone of all of those things. I would love to pick your brain on that.
The first word immediately that comes to my mind is solidarity, right?
Mm,
When I perform in, I think honestly, any show that's on Transplanar's network as a white person,
mhm,
I am bringing my understanding of myself in solidarity, right?
mm,
Whenever I bring parts of myself, it is not to overwrite or to draw upon whiteness. It is to say, which is the foundation of, I think, the way that we make work.
yeah,
It's about seeing and recognizing each other, right? Without the attachments of like those heavy prescriptive models, right?
yeah,
Of like, I see the story that you are telling, and you see the story that I am telling, right?
mhm,
Uh, and I think the constant thought that I have whenever that question is asked, can I do this? Can I do that? The question,
yeah,
like, there's no answer for that. You
yeah.
know,
Okay,
my question is, why do you want to do that? My return question is, okay, so why do you want to do that? For what
probably the
reason?
better
For what
question.
purpose? Right? The better question to ask, and to ask yourself before you start asking other people, is, why do you want to do this? Right?
Mm,
And I've said why I want to play this game with Connie. It is an act of love.
yes.
Right? It is my act of love. The reason that we play Godkiller together, the reason that it's the two of us in this studio, is
Mm,
because Godkiller was made for me, and I was made to play Godkiller.
eh,
Right? That is the reason, right? That
mm,
is the context. And in this broader idea, this broader sense of like, why do you want to do this? Were you invited in? Is there like another way that this could be said? What are you bringing? Why aren't you just bringing yourself? Why are you
mm,
trying to bring something that isn't yours? Because everything that's part of Litany is part of me,
yeah.
right? And there's nothing that I'm trying to wear that isn't intrinsically part of me, or the part of the way that I'm loving Connie, right?
Mm,
Even in the moments where I am also speaking Mandarin in response to Connie, is my active love of being like, yes, I'm learning Mandarin to connect with you, right? To
yeah.
be a part of you, which was also explicitly invited.
Mhm,
uh, and I think that holds a huge weight for me, and is really important to me, because not engaging with that, again, is kind of what I said, not engaging in this way, I think would do a disservice to my relationship to this person, right?
yes.
To not hold that solidarity, to not try, to not see, to not engage, would do more harm
Yeah.
than good, I like, in our interpersonal relationship.
I mean, I really resonate with that. And Godkiller Last Hope kind of started with the idea that we wanted to play Godkiller. That was where it started. We didn't have any
Yeah.
ideas about the world. We knew the starting kind of non-negotiable factors, the non-variables, the constants were
Mhm,
I wanted to GM, C was gonna play, I was gonna
yes.
GM. And the characters, the story, the world, we didn't really know what they were gonna be when we made up this idea in the first place of doing this in studio production. Things started crystallizing around the
Yeah.
time we started like wrapping Arc 2. And we were like, what if we, set this game in the world of Arc 2, which is the Sister Realms, which is Xianxia based, which is based on my Chineseness, right? Based on my
Yeah.
dice work Chineseness. So that kind of came after, right? So that's the very practical reason for why C is the God Killer. Um, but the deeper reason, like C has touched on too, is story. As our first ever in studio venture, I knew I wanted it to be deeply personal. And I knew that I
Mm,
needed to tell this story with someone I could trust with my life,
absolutely.
and someone who is geographically close to me. Because it was in studio work. I'm so serious. So
Deeply important that
yeah,
actually.
no, that's actually extremely important. So C ticked all those boxes. I knew that I could tell a story with C and we could knock it out the fucking park, and that it could represent everything that Transplanar is about, and that we'd be able to do it quickly and well.
Yeah.
And there is no person in this world that I would rather play Godkiller with than with C. Thomas, because that's why I wrote the game in the first place. They are like the perfect representative for this game for me. They are the perfect player for me as the
Mm.
game master, and this was a specific love letter that I wrote to them. So like all
Mm.
these personal reasons is also why C is the person I have chosen. I've invited to this space to be my Godkiller.
Yeah.
And I also really resonate with what you have said, C, about solidarity. I think asking why you as a white person want to so there's a difference, I think, between
Okay.
being a white person and playing a character in a world that is culturally specific and
Okay.
being a white person and wanting to play an Asian person no matter what.
I
I
see.
think there's a huge difference. I think it's very contextual because
I agree. Yeah.
Camp A is like Coyote and Crow. Like
Mm.
in the game system, Coyote and Crow, you're playing a native person. You're playing an
Yeah.
indigenous person. The game explicitly invites you to do so and
Mhm.
asks that you do so because under the logic of that world, everyone in that area is indigenous, right?
Yes.
And we're not telling stories about the white people, right?
Mhm.
Or if whiteness even exists, because settler colonialism never touched the Americas.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I feel about game systems that are very culturally specific. Like Jiangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall. You're
Yeah.
supposed to play like a Chinese diasporic Chinese American, specifically
Mhm.
immigrant family, spanning generations, running a Chinese restaurant. Like that's what the game is built to do. Even if all of you are white people, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you're supposed to do. It would be
Yeah.
honestly, it would be pretty weird if you didn't, right? It would kind of like go against
Eliminate
the
the
core themes
premise.
and mechanics of the game.
Yeah.
Exactly, to eliminate the premise. And that's kind of the camp I think that Last Hope falls into, which
Yeah.
is that like this is the world.
Mhm.
So I don't want you to play a fish out of water because there is no like fantasy Europe equivalent. There's no like
Yeah.
fantasy post-settler colonialism America equivalent, in the sister realms.
Yeah.
So I know what you said earlier, see about like Litany not being Chinese. I feel like Litany is Schrodinger's Chinese. Litany is
Schrodinger's
both Chinese
Chinese.
and not Chinese at the same time. Yes. Because Chineseness technically doesn't exist in the sister
Yeah,
realms.
that's
It like
true, yeah.
technically isn't a thing.
Yeah,
But it
that's
also
true.
is. Kind of like how transness is in the greater Transplanar-verse, right?
that's
If
true,
like
yeah.
Mhm.
gender-based oppression didn't happen, would transness even exist? Right? If gender roles weren't a thing, right? It's a whole mind-blowing thing. And my answer is yes and no. It both does exist because we as people don't live in a non-colonial anti-orientalist world, so it's important for us to be represented in the work we make and for us to be culturally sensitive about the work we make as well. But
Absolutely.
also no, because in this world,
Yeah.
race isn't a thing, right? Like fantasy race, fictional race
Yeah.
isn't a thing. All of these things. So that's kind of my response to that question. And I think asking yourself why is really crucial. And the second camp of like, if you just, because there are some people who just want to be able to play an Asian person, I guess, if they're white, and it doesn't matter. They just want to be able to play their, very honestly very orientalist character with like a Japanese name but Chinese hanfu, and they eat Korean food. Like it's a whole
And it hurts
it's a whole
my
thing.
soul every time I have
Yep.
to witness it each time.
Yes.
Oh.
So the reasons I think are more important than whether you can or can't, because I think you can if the reasons and the context are there. And I think you shouldn't in a lot of other cases as well. But
Yeah.
I'm not a cop. I can't physically stop you from doing what you're going to do. It's just about why you're doing it and who you might be hurting in the process.
I think too something about like why this world, why this time, right? Is as we were wrapping up Arc 2, Connie, I remember when we decided to do Last Hope in the world of the Sister Realms, is that you turned to me and you had this like deeply sad look on your face and you were like, I'm gonna miss the Sister Realms. I don't want to go. I don't want to leave. And I was like, well, what the fuck am I gonna say to that? Like I wouldn't suggest it. Like I wouldn't be like, we don't have to leave. What if we didn't leave? The Sister Realms is already a god killer world. It's already part of our narrative. Let's stay. This is a place you love, that you want to deepen, that you want to explore more. And even in the text and the rules of Godkiller, right? You are supposed to make the world together. The world is made of Connie and the world is made of me also, right? And that is the purpose of Godkiller, is to create the world together, right? There are so many different elements of it that are me, and there are so many different elements of it that are Connie. And even in the way that you said to Connie, like it all it hmm, it almost does a disservice to say that this is just Connie's world that I'm stepping into, right? Like this is the world that we created together in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, we very much did. You as my dramaturg
Yeah.
in Arc 2 when I was first laying out the bones of the world, and then as the player and the co-creator when we were deepening out the areas of the world we were going to explore in Last
Yeah.
Year. It is very much an act of co-creation. It's not like this is just me and C stepping in. Like
Yeah,
again,
and-
C is not even a guest in this world. They're not a tourist, they're not a guest, not a foreigner. This world is Litany's home.
Yeah.
And this world is C's home as well. And that was really
Yeah.
important to me.
Yeah, and I mean that context I think is also especially important to keep in mind, is that this was a world that was crafted for the Chaos Protocol Arc 2 and was dramaturged by UC and was very, very much a collaborative experience between the both of y'all in crafting this world for the three of us who are not Chinese, or of
Yeah.
the Chinese diasporic experience of stepping into the world of the sister realms, not to Yaolan, but to the city of heaven. And it is very, very clearly um, a duet of an ambitious project that both of you undertook for this, right? And on that kind of level of talking about like the emerging words that are coming up to me right now are like solidarity, it is cultural exchange, and it is like collaboration, right? These are the things that are resonating with me, and I really wanted to ask about what does it mean for the both of y'all to have like that genuine spirit of collaboration across racial lines and experiences, and also what can the rest of us take from this, honestly, because this is an ongoing conversation that we consistently have in this space. Where do we go to next?
My first immediate thought was fucking ally, I want an accomplice. You know? Like that was my immediate thought, is that I think when we're talking about solidarity, I talk a lot about, and I feel like this is the right space to get into it
Absolutely.
because it's you, Val, because I trust you and you are on the cast of Transplanar big campaign. Let's get deep into liberational storytelling and what that means for me.
Yeah.
So Transplanar, I said this at the top of the stream, we're not transgender, people of color led, all these things. Yes, non-colonial, anti-orientalist, that's who we are. Those are the kinds of stories we tell. And I think for like 90% of the time, that's enough for me to just talk about. Like whatever interview show I go on, whoever I talk to, whoever I pitch Transplanar to, people understand, oh, we're diverse, we're trans-led, people of color at the helm of it, and we are very progressive, right? That's basically what 80 to 90% of the people need to know in order to watch our show and engage with our stuff.
Yeah.
But the core of it, the heart of Transplanar for me, what that means is I'm representation, diversity, equity, inclusion. Yes, all of these things vitally important, worthwhile, good things to strive for and advocate for. I'm interested in striving beyond that too, though. I'm interested in striving beyond logics of representation and diversity and into logics of liberation.
Okay.
Like genuine liberation. And what that means to me is I think there is a very tangible reason why women's empowerment is digestible under capitalism. There are seminars about women's empowerment, but women's liberation, that threatens patriarchy. Because liberation implies, and it, for me, promotes and advocates for destroying hegemony, destroying cis hetero white supremacist patriarchy, right? Destroying capitalism by any means necessary, right? Like I'm not a pacifist, you know, and I'm just kind of gonna leave it at that. And I think that can be scary for some people to hear. But I think Last Hope and Transplanar is deeply radical because I,
Yeah.
as a person, my politics are deeply radical. I believe in taking
Yes.
radical action, and I support people who do in order to be liberated and to struggle for freedom. And looping back to what
Mhm.
you were saying about like, allies, solidarity, accomplices, that means for me, I the white people that I trust in my life are very few and far between.
Mm.
Very, very few and far between. And trust is contextual. And trust is never permanent. Trust is always negotiable. Trust can be revoked. Trust can be broken. Trust can be rebuilt. And that trust for me extends to C. And honestly, like very few other white people, just because I have been burned so many times in the past before
Yeah.
in extremely deeply fucked up ways, both like career wise and personally by white people, specifically white trans people, specifically white queer people, which is why, if I had to choose between Transplanar being all trans or POC led, I would choose POC led.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
And I think C understands that. C knows that. C knows that.
The day you tell me to back off and pack it up, I'm gone. That's
I would
like
never
that's
do that to you. But
and I
that
appreciate
makes me
that.
so
Right?
sad when you say that. But yeah, no, for sure. Like, and that to me is kind of what being an accomplice means as well. Because I think like a lot of people, white people who strive toward like being allies are always like rather passive about it. It's like, tell us what to do, right? But, and I think it comes
Yes.
from like a well-intentioned place of not wanting to like be the center of everything and to be the one to like, they don't want to overstep, right? There's this, I think, a very well-intentioned like fear of overstepping or of like, taking up too much space, right? Of like sitting
Yeah.
up when they should be standing up when they should be sitting down. and
But it's
listening,
also like,
right?
but it's also like, this is where I'll get into it. But it's also in a similar vein of a lot of the what is resonating to me right now is like label inequality between like typically in heterosexual couples of women of the household, men of the household, and putting that metaphor into this particular aspect of liberation. It's like, but you also know that the dishes need cleaning, right? Like, the dishes are dirty and in the sink too, right? Like, the garbage also needs to be taken out, right? Like, you don't
That's how
need
you
us
know if an anarchist
tell
man
you
can be
that.
taken seriously is if he does the fucking dishes.
Like, I'm just like it's, yes, I agree, it's a well-intentioned point to want to listen and uplift folks of color. And let me tell you, there are plenty of instances when you all should have done that, especially in this space. But there's also many instances where it's like, okay, but obviously don't have all white tables, right? Like, obviously don't do that, right? Obviously don't commit an Orientalism, right? Like, yes, you want to say so.
So this is something that would happen very often in my college experience as a dancer,
see?
as a dance scholar, right? So there were offered at my college in my departments lots of different types of culturally specific dance classes and dance history classes, such as like black movement politics and liberational choreography is the name of a course I took. There were 4 people enrolled in it. There were 4 people enrolled in this course because I asked so many of my white dance friends being like, why aren't you taking this course? I'm learning so fucking much. This is integral to the work that I want to do as a person who needs multiple perspectives to be able to grow and understand this world around me, right? Like what, and they're like, oh, well, like it's like like what am I going to use? Like I know, like I should just, I'm going to take modern instead with our white professor. And I'm like, you're going to take modern instead for the 4th time?
For the 4th time?
For the 4th time, you're going to take modern again? Oh, you're going to fucking study like Forsyth again? You're going to take ballet again? You're going to, and it's like, oh, your whole, like, you think, right? You think that liberation and dance is adding one black dancer to your white ballet piece, right? That is informed exclusively by white choreography, right? And that is not what liberation is to me, right? Like, I intend to fucking be there, right? In the world where we fucking dismantle white supremacy, where we fucking
Yeah.
dismantle patriarchy, where we dismantle, right, the tools of oppression, right?
Yeah.
Because I can see the way that they inform the way that fuck, it's a death cult. I do not intend to stay in the death cult,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And it has always frustrated me very deeply because that was
Yes.
that was the course that I think I learned and grew the most as an artist, right?
Mm.
And my Haitian dance class, right?
Mhm.
Like, those were the places that I was able to recontextualize and reconstruct what it meant to be a movement artist
Mm.
outside of white hegemony, which
Mm.
is integral to the work that should be done by anyone who is interested in making art,
Yeah.
right? Go on, Connie. You're
Yes,
you're
and I have
cooking.
so much to say about that. Yes,
And
to
this is the
everything you've said.
forum. This is
I have so
Dicey
much to say.
Banter. This is my show.
Yes, Dicey Banter. I love this. I love this space. First of all, I think a lot of the impulse from people, from white people who, for example, like let's say your dancing peers, is rooted, I think, in maybe a charitable reading. Is that they wouldn't want to take up space, even though the
I
people
had
teaching
to
it were
beg.
like, please.
I had to beg my best friend to join the course so it wouldn't be dropped from the roster, is what I mean. I had to beg another person to join the class with me who was also white.
They're not. They're not.
Who
a
was not a
dancer.
dancer. They were a Russian major. They were a Russian lit major. I forced them to join this class so that it wouldn't get dropped by a black feminist professor who was teaching the course. She had 4 students. That's
Yeah.
fucked up.
So that's where that like disconnect is, right? They're like, I don't want to take up space. Please come! Please, for the love of God, show up. That's my response. The less charitable reading is I think the truer reading is that I feel like a lot of white people are just fundamentally disinterested in non-white perspectives. And they don't think that there's anything that they could learn there. I think
Especially
that's
the
what
latter.
it fucking is.
Especially
That's
the
what it
latter.
is.
Mhm.
That's what it is. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy too, because like the greats. Let's talk literature, right? Let's talk. You said
right.
Russian lit. I'm thinking about lit. Talk literature. The greats, right? All white men.
Yep.
The greats that are taught on every like intro to like literature or whatever 101, all white men. And there's like tons of like racist arguments for why this is. They're like, oh well, it's the Western canon. Of course it's gonna be Western writers, or whatnot. And I'm like, where's James Baldwin on that list though? Where's Zora Neale
Mhm.
Hurston? Like, what are we talking about here? Right?
Mhm.
But the truth of the matter is, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because when the only things you are taught from birth are the words, the art. We're talking about art here, the art of land owning, able-bodied, cis-het white men. Of
Mhm.
course you're gonna think that that is the default state of the world, that
Absolutely.
their stories are universal stories, that
Mhm.
what they have to say fundamentally matters, that they are the movers, shakers, and producers of history,
I mean,
that for all their faults, they are the main characters of Earth.
that's the
Which
point you
is-
brought with Pixar, right? I mean, Pixar
Yep.
exec says no Turning Red, no Encanto, no deeply personal explorations for the catharsis of the director. What is universal? It's white. It's white middle class experiences of storytelling. That's
And
what
that's
that
cultural
means.
imperialism.
Yeah.
That's cultural imperialism too, like, because it's not just, and I think people are becoming more and more aware of it, and as we have access to this, radical knowledge, we are able to push back against it more and more. But,
Mhm.
it's white supremacy is an illusion. It is a lie,
Mm.
right? White men are not more important than
Yeah.
any other person. White supremacist patriarchy has been better at one thing than other systems, which is oppressing people. That's your legacy. That's what
Yep.
you're good at. You're good at exploiting and oppressing. And that's pretty fucked up. And I think that What I want from accomplices is an understanding of that and an ability to proactively, without anyone telling you or holding your hand through it, be able to decenter yourself when you need to be decentered, and to stand up and show up when you need to stand up and show up. Because it's going to be different, right? Like, not every problem can be hammered at. Not every issue is a nail. And you have to have a breadth of tools to deal with situations. And you have to have the ability to critically think for yourself and engage in situations, to know when you are needed to speak up and know when you are needed to sit down. And that, I think, is hard, but you need to do it.
I've got another piece of that, which is that decentering whiteness does not mean removing yourself completely. You have to
It's
show
not
up in
erasure.
order to participate, right?
Yeah.
You have to show. I have to step into the world of the sister realms. I can't just
Yeah.
fuck off and leave, right? I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to show up. I have to show up and live and be comfortable in a place that does not center whiteness, because that is not how the fucking world works, and that's not how I want the world to work. Right? I said this
Absolutely.
earlier, but it bears repeating. I'm not going to ask Connie to make their world less Chinese so that I can feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
That's fucked up,
It is.
right? And yeah, just everything you said, Connie. I'm gonna pull us in a direction to thinking about audience, right? Thinking
Absolutely.
about the audience and the lessons learned from the Second Stranger and even the first few arcs of the Chaos Protocol, in thinking about how audiences respond specifically to NPCs, because I've seen this. I've seen this happening generally, right?
Mhm.
Insofar as I think the fantastical nature of some of the characters in The Second Stranger allow white fans to project whiteness onto characters who are not intended to be white. I think that a lot of white fans default into thinking that Rev, Kane, Atalanta, Mercy are white, or they can relate to them more because they relate to their possibility and potential of whiteness. Whereas I see a lot of fans currently for NPCs in the Chaos Protocol, I think potentially struggling to find certain characters attractive or worth like considering, thinking, and talking about and engaging with, because they are specifically people of color and are specifically undeniably people of color. And we can even think about this in terms of fandom misogyny too, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yes.
certain characters are more relatable, right? Because they are transmasculine to a lot of the, mostly like to the transmasculine audience of Transplanar, right? And not being able to relate, care for, or invest in characters that are more feminine presenting, even if they are still trans, right? Even if they are still deeply flawed and deeply complex in everything that you're looking for in a like male coded character, right? That they go unseen, that they go uncelebrated.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this plenty of times on this channel. Folks who are regulars here, I've talked about this on the rooftops. Sayer gets way too much breathing room. He does. I built him for the specific purpose of being a complicated figure. I want, like, there was even a part of me that really wanted him to be kind of polarizing when I designed it, because that's who he is in the world of trans and in the world of the Chaos Protocol. He's meant to be a polarizing figure. He's meant to, people either really like him or really don't like him. And that's part of a lot of his journey and character arc. And there isn't enough grace given to his sister, whom they love very, very much, and whom they worship the very ground they walk upon, right? And it is a thing that's I've talked about many times, and it's hard to not look at that and think, this is a flavor of misogyny, that Sayer gets far more grace than perhaps a, and it's also a thing about like, oh, because he's loud about it, right? His damage is pretty loud, his brokenness is
Mhm.
really loud. Sing's brokenness, Sing's trauma isn't less because she keeps it under wraps or is far quieter about it, which is often the experiences of women and femme people across the globe, because their struggles are silent, or
Mhm.
silenced, I should say.
Mhm. And I think this what we're teasing out here is that if I cannot connect with on a emotional level, engage with, create with characters that do not like that are different from me, right?
Yeah.
In like if I cannot relate to characters who are different me, then I have failed as both an ally and an accomplice, and I have failed in
Mm,
solidarity, right? Like that's pretty integral to me, right?
yeah.
If I am unable to connect with someone in any way, shape, or form, then I have failed to do my personal duty in understanding what solidarity means to me, right? Being able to see and say, I see you and I love you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's an integral part of what liberation means to me.
Mm,
uh and this story, Last Hope, is me fucking screaming as loud as I can, I see you and I love you,
mm,
right? um and that to me is part of like my work as a white person who strives for liberation.
mm,
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's something to be said here as well about how, yes, Last Hope is deeply culturally specific, and the world of it has been made actively, intentionally,
mm,
with co-collaboration with C as well.
yeah.
And I also just wanted to just tell a fantasy story too,
Yeah.
and like not have to feel the pressure um or the demands to like perfectly represent transness
Yes.
or queerness or Chineseness. Like yes, this is a very queer, very trans, very Chinese world because I am all of these things, and I
Mm,
couldn't authentically build a world without bringing these things in anyway, even if it wasn't set in the sister realms, even if it wasn't set in the same world as Arc 2. No doubt there would still be a lot of cultural touchstones and things relevant to my personal history. Like, I cannot not make art like this.
mm,
Um, by God, we mentioned this in the first half of the interview. We also need to be able to give ourselves the ability to just like be free and create
yeah.
and like turn that critical voice off, because you cannot create while that voice is on.
Yeah.
Like, I have to turn it off, or else I will be stuck. Like I mentioned
Mm,
before, I'll be stuck. And I think uh having C there as an active co-creator uh has was such a beautiful, lovely, wonderful, creatively enriching experience. And Zoe too, as the dramaturg, was
absolutely.
there,
Yes.
and invaluable. I don't even want to say support, because that almost makes it sound like diminishing the
Mm,
importance of her role. But I'll say support because I'm
Their
lacking another
role.
word. Their role, because that almost feels like it's diminishing their role. But they were like an invaluable support to us as a
mm,
dramaturg as well, in helping us free our minds from that voice and
mhm,
create on our terms.
So I suppose with all this in mind, right? Thinking about all of these things, thinking about what it means for me to be a part of this process, uh, not as a guest but as a co-creator, right? Um, is if you find yourself able to connect to Litany's story due to to their whiteness, to my whiteness, right? Um, it is important to remember and to engage with the way that they interact with the world around them. Do not do Litany the disservice of thinking that they are separate from this world, and do not do the world a disservice of thinking that it is separated from Litany. Even as this journey parallels like what it means to be a mortal, right? That is very much entrenched in what it means to be a mortal in Yaolan, right? And in community with the people that Litany will meet in this series. And that is what is important to me. And the way that that resonates outward into the world, beyond these almost like academic meanings of like truly being at the table with someone, someone you love, um, and what it means to write that letter of love back and forth.
With that, thank you both of you for that like really in-depth exploration about really difficult topics that I think need to be spoken about, needed to be discussed instead of hanging around the periphery of the space. And on the topic of the space, the actual play space, bringing it back to Godkiller and bringing it back to this incredible show that is about to premiere the end of this week. Um, what do the both of you hope is the lasting legacy that Godkiller Last Hope is going to bring onto the actual play space? And what waves are you hoping or expecting it to hit within it?
I can take this
Go
to
ahead,
start.
Connie.
Yeah.
Go.
I want Last Hope's legacy to show that trans and queer people of color are always, always the people on the bleeding edge of innovation in any creative industry. And that the only reason, one of the core fundamental reasons why we haven't blown up as much as we deserve to is because of systemic oppression, is because of racism, is because of sexism, is because of capitalism, is because of patriarchy, transphobia, what have you, and not because of a lack of merit. And I think that is a great tragedy that I hope will change. That is my last hope that will change. Because if this, I want this show to be able to open up definitions of what actual play can be, what in-studio work can look like. Because while talking about this show, while putting this show together and speaking with various folks in the industry, various folks that I know, I was told, "Oh, you can't do a duet actual play. That won't work." I was told like this will never work. That's
Seriously?
not what audiences want. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I was told, it has to be shot this way, it has to be filmed this way. Like there are these things that audiences want, these things that they expect, like things about music, things about the hardware, the hard technical parts of it, but also like I've been told that you can't fund actual plays without like a very viable financial like model. Like sponsors don't care about the art, sponsors only care about the numbers. Right, is like I think something that is oft repeated in the space when we're seeking funding. I think that may be true in a lot of ways, but I want it to not be true. I want my work to be worth funding in and of itself, regardless of if it sells t-shirts for you, And I think that if you are a company or if you are someone with a lot of money or if you are leading a company or in charge of a company's money and you have some money to spend, I think that, and especially if you don't have any shareholders that you are responsible for, I think that it is an ethical imperative for you to support work by trans and queer people of color, specifically Black trans people and Indigenous trans people as much as possible. And I hope that what we're able to do in Last Hope opens more doors for other queer and trans people of color in the space too. If it means other sponsors like realizing that there's incredible work out there that if only given a platform and some money can happen, and if it's your money and your platform that can help unlock that, then you are doing a net good to this space, regardless of what you expect to get out of it in return in terms of revenue, right? That's kind of where my head is at.
I want Godkiller's legacy, Last Hope's legacy, to be a love letter to actual play. We were talking about this on Three Black Halflings yesterday, I think, where they're like, "Oh, how did you start tabletops?" And my answer for that is Connie dragged me in kicking and screaming. I would not know actual play tabletops without Connie Chang. I would not be here in actual play tabletops without Connie Chang. The work that I make is for Connie Chang and like for my own heart, which is intrinsically intertwined with Connie Chang. And that's what I not to be gay on Dicey Banter, but
Being gay on Dicey Banter? More likely than you think.
More likely
Everything
than you
here,
think.
I'm like, everything here has been made by my husband. Like,
Thank you, Max.
thank you, Max.
Thank you,
Our
Max.
husband.
Our husband. So that's what I want in my deeply personal way, Last Hope's legacy to be is which is every art that I make is a resounding scream into the void of what my heart is, and my heart is intrinsically entwined in love.
Yeah, I feel so fucking immensely grateful and lucky that I'm able to do this with C, with the person who means the most to me in the world. I feel like so unbelievably privileged that I get to make art with the love of my life. And that's what Last Hope is. That's what Godkiller is. That's where the game came out of. I built the system for C. I wanted, if through my love I created. Like I wanted to make something that would just be for us, that would be our thing. And then it ended up being this thing that I sold to the evil hat, right? But I still own it. They're very open about that. But I feel, every step of the way, my journey in actual play is walked in tandem with C. Thomas. And we've spoken kind of, about like what we want to do like 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. If we're, are we still going to be doing actual play when we're in our 40s or 50s? Who knows? I have no idea. The future is an open book. But wherever we end up going, whatever we end up doing, we're going to do it together. And that's the legacy of Last Hope. It is not the beginning, not the end, but one of many steps along this journey of love that C and I are embarking on.
All the funny gay jokes aside, in all sincerity and love, congratulations on Godkiller Last Hope. Congratulations to both of you to the new venture and in studio space and all the love and success for the both of y'all. You know my kingdom for the both of y'all, obviously. Obviously, without hesitation. And with that, as we begin wrapping up Dicey Banner, I want to leave the floor with the both of y'all, whether to ominously or affectionately tease what audiences can look forward to or get excited about for Godkiller Last Hope. I instead of words, I'll give you all a sentence. Give me a sentence, an ominous or affectionate one.
I have 3 words for you, just like
Uh-oh.
just like earlier.
Terrifying.
Ghost man tiger.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's so true.
that's Valiant Dorian core and all the furries that hang out in my chat. Furries, wake up!
Furries, wake up! Come here! Bus, 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 bus.
Come here,
Furries,
come
wake up,
here.
come here.
Here's my teaser. We haven't talked about this literally at all. There's a moment where I step off stage, and I'm really, really excited for people to see it.
Oh my god, yeah. I don't
fuck does
want to
that
I don't
mean?
want to talk about it
That's
at
it.
all
That's
until
it.
it
What
happens.
the fuck does that mean?
We're not-
Okay, a Dicey Banter exclusive, I guess. C steps
Yep,
off
that's-
stage, and we just have to hold that kernel until whenever that episode premieres. Christ Almighty! Well, with that, thank you all so much for being here on Dicey Banter. Thank you to both of you for being guests on Dicey Banter. Let us introduce to both of you as we wrap up. Starting with you, Connie.
It's a me, Connie. Hey folks, my name's Connie, pronouns they, he, and she. I'm across the internet at by Connie Chang, ByConniechang. You can mostly find me on Twitter and TikTok, and I run Transplanar RPG, which is the aforementioned all transgender, people of color led dark fantasy actual play channel, telling stories set in an original non-colonial anti-Orientalist multiverse. You can find Transplanar on YouTube and on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Twitter at Transplanar RPG. Trans as in transgender, planar as in interplanar travel. There's no E. There's no E in our name at all. Some people spell planar with an E. There's no E. No E's. Transplanar RPG. I'll pass things over to C.
Thank you so much, Connie. My name is C. I use they, them pronouns. You can find me making very trans, very gay love letters on the internet at C Plays RPG. You can also find me as the producer, dramaturg, and general co-conspirator of Transplanar RPG, which Connie has already talked about. I can't wait for the premiere to come out this Saturday, June 29th at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time, both on YouTube and live streaming on Twitch. So make sure you tune in for that. I'm so excited. Last Hope is just 8 episodes, and each episode is just around an hour each. So they are very accessible, short bites of episodes. So I'm very excited to share this tragically, viciously divine narrative with the world. And I'll pass it back to the one and only immaculate host of Dicey Banter. Thank you so much, Val, for being an incredible interviewer. I had literally such a good time.
Thank you so much for having us.
You didn't think you didn't think that you were just gonna get the gratitude offline. You're getting the gratitude on also. Yeah, it's part of the outro. You can't even stop me because technically
Sip your
it's not my
victory juice.
outro. Sip
it. Sip it, Val.
sip.
Sip it.
Oh my god, I'm feeling very loved, and my goodness, I love my friends, and I love the both of you very much. Congratulations once again. Thank you for being my guests. Thank you for giving me the honor and privilege to interview you and be your host for this evening. I'll introduce myself. Hi everyone, I'm Valiant Dorian. I've been your host this evening of Dicey Banter. This is my channel. I stream various things on here. You should check me out. On Mondays, we typically do Dicey Banter. We also cover a lot of TTRPG content and gaming. So you can watch me be really bad at games or really explain TTRPGs really well to you on days that I stream those. You can also find me on Transplanar RPG. Right now, obviously, we're in Godkiller season, so you will find me in chat this Saturday. So join me there as we watch Godkiller Last Hope together. And once Arc 3 Chaos Protocol starts up, I'll be playing Sayer, the misbeloved twin brother of the Chosen One. I also want to bring up the fact that Dicey Banner can only be made possible by the incredible patrons that we have. If you enjoy the show, consider pledging on our Patreon. Even on the free tier, you get exclusive news and access to incredible backstage information about all the upcoming content I do, including works in progress for game design stuff that I'm doing as well. And speaking of game design, hey, by this week or the week after, the Beast Within Quick Start Guide should be out. You'll be able to start playing with pre-generated characters and playing the Beast Within. And if you want to get your government mandated persona, that's the game that will grant that to you. And with that, thank you all so much for being here. Please tune in this weekend for Transplanar RPG's premiere of Godkiller Last Hope. And as we wrap up, enjoy the trailer once more and take care, everybody. Take care. Bye.